When I was young and carefree, I used to drink quite heavily. I have no idea how it happened that I was never stopped, perhaps because there were many nights when I found myself at the parking lot of my residential complex and had no clue how I got there. One night, after getting quite drunk, I stumbled and fell onto the railroad tracks when wobbling back to my car. I tried to get up but couldn't maintain my balance and simply crashed between the wooden ties and stones like a caught squirrel. Just as I was contemplating just resting there, a bright light suddenly engulfed me, and I heard the whistle of a train. I lifted my eyes and saw a giant engine bearing down on me, signaling my imminent demise. In panic, I struggled repeatedly to stand up, but couldn't. Finally, I managed enough control over my body to crawl away about 10 seconds before its steel wheels would have crushed me. Later that night, as I sobered up, I made a promise to myself never to get drunk again. No, I didn't go to AA. I didn't go through any 12-step programs, and I didn't quit drinking. From that night on, I just drank responsibly. I never got drunk again and barely even tipsy. Hanging out with the guys, I would have 1 or 2 beers all night. On dates, maybe a glass of wine, but that was it. I am still the same today. It's been more than 10 years since I had such a thrill. So, one evening, I was surprised when my wife, Cora, and 2 of our friends, Brad and Susie Cunningham, seemed to be trying to get me to drink. I suspected some kind of bet. Someone was betting they could get me to drink, and someone was betting against them. I hoped my wife was the last one. A little extra money never hurts. The evening started quite normally. 2 days before, Cora informed me that she had invited the Cunninghams to dinner. I wouldn't call them our best friends, but we had known each other for a few years and occasionally hung out. Still in the kitchen with Cora, we saw their car headlights hit the panoramic window when they swerved into the driveway. "Honey, could you get the whiskey from the pantry while I go greet them?" Cora asked, untying her apron. "Of course, dear. You go ahead and greet them. I'll be there in a minute," I said, putting on whiskey glasses and hearing the usual welcoming jokes from the living room as I took the decanter out of the pantry. I placed it on the stove and checked if everything was ready. I was on my way to the lively trio when everything suddenly fell silent. As I turned the corner, it seemed I had caught some whispering among them 3. Of course, I had no reason to be suspicious. Hey, no secrets in this house," I joked. My light-hearted comment seemed to catch them off guard. "Hi, buddy," Brad responded, taking a step back. "Hi, Steve." Susie chimed in before I could respond to her husband. She extended her hand and kissed me on the cheek while Cora hung their coats in the hallway. "Hey, what does a guy have to do to get a drink around here?" Brad boomed, breaking the awkward silence when we shook hands. Now, I was a bit puzzled. We barely exchanged greetings, and he was already hitting me up for a drink. I started to wonder if they already had a couple before they came. "Just follow me," I said. They all followed me into the study and took their seats as I played the role of the host and prepared drinks. I handed Cora and Susie a glass of white wine each. Brad was a vodka and martini guy. I didn't need to ask. If he ever changed his drink, I'd faint. I popped open my light beer just before handing Brad his martini. "Why not make one for yourself and join me?" he suggested. "No, I'll stick with what I have," I replied. Beer, beer, beer," he muttered. "You're no fun." "Come on, Steverino, be a man tonight. Make yourself a real drink," he said, lifting his martini to illustrate what a real drink looked like. To my great surprise, Cora interjected. "Yes, dear. I don't think I've ever seen you with anything other than beer. Why not join Brad?" I looked at my wife in astonishment. We had never really discussed why I didn't drink much. I wasn't proud of how I had been beaten up. Unlike some, I never considered drunkenness a major life achievement, so I never discussed it with Cora. I wasn't trying to hide it from her. It just never came up in conversation. However, after 7 years of marriage, you'd think she would know that I don't drink to get drunk. Her comment was my first hint that something was going on. Whatever it was, it must have been what they were whispering about when they first entered. It meant all 3 of them were involved in it. My mind immediately went into detective mode. What could they be planning? It had to be somehow related to my drinking, or lack thereof. I came to the only conclusion that came to mind. A bet. Since no one had ever seen me drunk before, I was sure Brad was boasting that he could get me to drink, and Cora probably bet against him that he couldn't. But why was she encouraging me to drink? Maybe she just wanted to make sure Brad and Susie couldn't accuse her of cheating when it came time to settle the bet. Or perhaps Susie made a bet in my favor. "Maybe later," I said. It all seemed so strange. I needed time to think it over. I began to doubt that my wife was in my corner at dinner when she tried to get me another beer before I even finished half of the first one. I decided the only way to find out what was going on was to play along. But how? I couldn't pour my beer down the drain and say I drank it. Too noticeable, I devised a plan. After dinner, we all retired to the living room. Cora and the Cunninghams took their seats, and I headed to the bar. "Another martini, Brad?" "Yes." "You know what? Maybe I'll join you. I'll make a picture." I watched carefully as they all exchanged glances and smirked. It was then that I suspected they were all trying to get me drunk just to see if they could. That's all I could think of. Well, the joke would be on them. I planned to play it out until the end. While everyone chatted, paying no attention to me, I prepared 2 pitchers, one with martinis and the other with lemon water. If I pour it into a martini glass and drop an olive in it, no one will know. I put the martini on the counter and the other pitcher on the shelf behind the counter. As long as no one saw me pour them, I was in the clear. I brought another glass of white wine for each lady and then returned for the martinis. Handing Brad his glass, I felt all eyes on me as I took a sip from mine. I wanted to immediately start acting drunk, but obviously they wouldn't buy it, so I had to maintain composure for a while and let myself slowly get tipsy. While we sat and talked, it didn't take me long to finish my glass. I stood up and went to the bar. "Brad, another one." "No, thanks, Steve. I still have some, but you go ahead." Making sure no one was watching, I poured more lemon water, added an olive, and joined the group. I didn't want it to look too obvious, so I took a little more time with it. After another 20 or 30 minutes of conversation, Cora asked for more white wine. "Yes, me too," said Susie. "How about another round for all of us, Stevens?" Brad added. And again, I poured drinks all around. So far, I had only had 1 beer, but everyone thought I had drunk 3 martinis on top of that. It was time to start showing some effects. I deliberately began to speak a little slower, even pausing a couple of times to gather my thoughts. Over the next hour, I had 2 more against everyone else. By then, I allowed my eyelids to droop and spoke incoherently. For a few minutes, I just sat silently, nodding my head up and down. It was time to make it believable, so I struggled to my feet, swaying, walked to the bar, poured myself another, then staggered back and plopped onto a stool. I finished it in 3 gulps before finally closing my eyes and letting my chin fall to my chest. There I remained. First, I heard Susie's voice. Did he fall asleep? Cora started shaking my shoulder. Sweetie, honey, are you okay? He's out like a light. I heard Brad's voice. I knew I could drink him under the table. Oh, I'm not sure about this, Cora said. Come on, Cora. Brad's voice reached my ears. You can't back out now. After all this? Not a chance. Yeah, Cora, let's do it. The plan has worked perfectly so far. Later, tonight, we'll get some material from Brad and spread it all over Steve's pencil. He'll never know it's not his. He'll be completely convinced we did it. Once he thinks we've already slept together, Brad is convinced he can talk him into swapping again, but next time when he's sober. We've talked about this, Cora. Yes, I know, but talking about it and actually doing it are two different things. Okay, the only decision I had to make was whether I wanted to fight for my marriage or drop Cora. Her voice sounded like she was backing off. I could give her the benefit of the doubt, just open my eyes and stop everything in its tracks. The problem was, I always wondered if she would go through with it. This little unanswered question would haunt me to the grave, so I'll pretend a little longer and see what she's going to do. If she decides to go through with it, I'll throw her out with the other two. I noticed someone getting up from the couch, then heard Brad's voice. Let's go. Take him upstairs. I'll grab him by the shoulders. Susie, take him by the legs. Come on, Cora, help us. Brad grabbed me under the armpits. I was already about to put an end to all this when Cora's panicked voice gave me new hope. Stop. No. I can't do this. I must be out of my mind to agree to this. Cora, No, Brad, no. I can't cheat on Steve. He's a good husband. I love him, and I won't risk losing him. Cora, you won't lose him. Susie argued. He can't blame you for sleeping with Brad if he thinks he slept with me. I don't care. Cora decisively replied. I won't allow this. I think you guys better leave. Brad started to argue. Cora, Cora said to leave, and now get out of my house and take your wife with you. I shouted, jumping off the couch, surprising everyone. And never come here again, or talk to me, or Cora. Oh my God, Cora exclaimed, covering her mouth with her hand. All three of them nearly jumped out of their skins. Brad thought he could talk his way out of it. We were just joking, buddy. We knew you were pretending. Brad, if you're not out of this house by the time I count to 3, I swear we'll do it. 1. Okay. Come on, Susie, let's go. I looked at my wife, whose fear manifested salty droplets streaming from her eyes and down her cheeks. If you want to go with them, go right now. You can sleep with your dear old Brad any time you want, I growled. No. She said, shaking her head. Please, Steve, forgive me. I'm so sorry. I would never have gone along with this. But you talked about it, didn't you? She knew I heard every word, and she couldn't deny it. She just stared at me, pleading for mercy with her tear-filled eyes. Have you already slept with them? No, never. I swear, she exclaimed resolutely. I stood there for a few seconds, watching her. Her whole body was literally trembling. If I hadn't been eavesdropping, I wouldn't have believed her, but from what I heard, it sounded like this was their first connection. I still hadn't decided whether our marriage would continue or not. What was so important about swapping partners? Do you have feelings for Brad? No, not at all. I don't know. One time, Susie and I were talking, and the conversation just developed. The next thing I knew, she said, Brad had talked about swapping partners. And you agreed to it. It was a statement, not a question. Well, right away, I said you would never agree to it. Then Brad was hatching this plan. Susie and I talked about it a few more times. It seems like every time we meet, we only talk about this. So it's Susie. Do you want to sleep with Susie? No, Steve, it's not like that. Then what? I asked, raising my voice. I'm trying to understand what could make you go along with this. I saw her face cringe at the direct question. I have to tell you, Cora. Right now, I'm struggling to keep this marriage alive. You can't even imagine how much you disappointed me tonight. I keep asking myself how a wife who claims to love her husband could plot and intrigue behind his back. You said it yourself. If your plan had worked, I would have been devastated thinking I had deceived you. It's not something you just realized tonight. It's something you knew all along as you planned your little dirty betrayal. This is what you were counting on. Regardless of the circumstances, you knew how guilty I would feel, and you were going to use that guilt against me. This broke the spell. Cora burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. I'm not made of stone. As angry and hurt as I was, I didn't take pleasure in seeing her like this. Some part of me wanted to hug and comfort her, but a larger part of me saw her pain as a small measure of justice. I wasn't going to hug her, but I also didn't want to stand and watch her cry, so I turned, went back to the kitchen, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. It took a good 10, maybe 15 minutes before Cora pulled herself together and joined me at the kitchen table. She had washed her face in the bathroom, holding a crumpled tissue in her hand. She lifted her head and looked at me from across the table. It seemed like she wanted to say something, but just couldn't get it out. I waited for a few moments, but I had questions that needed answers, so when it didn't seem like she was going to offer anything voluntarily, I started again. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think about your answer before you just blurt it out. She dabbed the corner of her eye with tissue and nodded. Do you still love me? I mean, like before. Do you still love me as much today as when we first got married, or have you lost that? I lost that. I don't need to think, Steve. Yes, I still love you today as much as I did when we first got married. Maybe even more. Then why? Cora. I think I just never thought we'd actually do something like this. It was just something like a fantasy, something naughty to think and talk about. When Brad said he could get you drunk, I remember thinking, yeah, that'll be the day. In all the time we've known each other, I've never seen you drunk. When Brad came up with his plan, the three of us talked about it. It was thrilling, but deep down, I knew it would never happen. Then why did you try so hard to make it happen? You almost dared me to have martinis with Brad. You tried to get me another beer at dinner. You had this look like you were trying to do it. I know what I did. I don't know. Maybe some part of me wanted to see if we could really do it. But I would never have gone through with it. Steve, honestly, when it dawned on me that we were actually going to do it, I was never going to treat you like that. You have to believe me, Steve. I really love you. I could never hurt you like that, she sobbed. I think the pain of betrayal has almost blocked this part of my mind. She hasn't gone through it. When it came to that, she backed off. That's the only reason I haven't walked out the door yet. So, I think I've come full circle. I had to make the same decision as an hour ago. I needed to think, maybe talk to someone. This could very well be the most important decision of my life. Cora, I think we need a couple of days away from each other. I'm going to check into a motel where I can be alone and think. Steve, please don't do this. I'll give you some space. I'll behave quietly and won't bother you, but I need you to be with me. No, I need time to truly look at our marriage. I just don't believe that a truly loving wife would act behind her husband's back and plan something like this. You said it was fun and thrilling. That bothers me, Cora. Even if you didn't go through with it, how can planning such betrayal against the person you love be fun? No, I won't buy into that. I tried to put myself in your shoes. I would never have thought of causing you pain, even if I didn't intend to do it. It wouldn't have given me any pleasure to come up with a plan behind your back, and damn it, I wouldn't have found it amusing. Cora was crying so hard that I wasn't sure she even heard what I said. I needed to get out of there. I gathered some things and returned to the kitchen with a suitcase in hand. She was trying her best not to cry. I think she wanted to try to convince me to stay again, but I wasn't going to give her that chance. I told Cora I would call her in a day or two and left. I fully intended to check into one of the many motels in the area, but as I headed towards the Motel Row, another thought occurred to me. I was from a small town in Indiana, about 80 miles from where I currently lived. My mom passed away a couple of years ago, but my dad still lived in the house I grew up in. I always considered him a pretty smart guy. I changed course and headed towards the freeway. Even with light traffic, the winding country roads in Indiana slowed me down. I was so caught up in my own problems that I didn't even think about the time. When I pulled into my dad's driveway, there was no light in the house. I took out my phone and checked. It was almost 2 in the morning. I wasn't sure what to do, and I had almost decided to sleep in the car until morning when I saw the light come on. A couple of minutes later, the porch light lit up. By the time I reached the door, he had already opened it. "Son," he said, surprised. "What's going on? Is someone hurt?" "No, not exactly, Dad. She's physically fine, but..." "Well, we've got some problems. I wanted to talk to you, but I'm really tired. Is it okay if I crash here tonight?" "Of course," he replied. "You know where everything is." We both went to bed. I had no idea how tired I was. Between the stress and the long drive, it seemed like I fell asleep before my head even touched the pillow. The first thing I remembered after lying down was the smell of fresh coffee the next morning. Dad had already showered and dressed by the time I followed my nose to the kitchen. He was waiting for me at breakfast. Stumbling, I walked up to the counter, took a cup from the cabinet, poured myself some Colombian brew before joining him. "Dad, how did you find out I came here late last night? It was downright eerie." "We had some trouble with the kids next door. They were shooting windows in cars and houses with a shotgun. I guess I was sleeping with one eye open and didn't even realize it. I heard you pull up before you even turned off the engine." I just nodded. As long as I could remember, there had always been a gang of local troublemakers causing some kind of nuisance. Of course, there was a time when I probably considered myself one of them. Are you ready to tell me why my son ended up on my driveway at 2 in the morning? He was my father. Straight to the point, I nodded and took a sip of the black gold. Cora and a couple of friends tried to do something to me last night that I just can't believe she would do something like that. He didn't say anything, just waited for me to continue. She and a married couple we know tried to get me drunk. The plan was to make me think I had been with another woman. I suppose they'll try to use it to convince me to swap wives. Was that something Cora agreed to? He inquired. I sat down and told my dad the whole story. How I initially thought it was a bet, how I feigned passing out, why Cora said she did what she did. All of it. So, Cora really thought you were out of commission when she announced an end to everything. Yes, I have no doubt she genuinely thought I was drunk. I put on quite a show. Well, I can certainly see your disappointment in her, he said with a sigh. What do you plan to do? I don't know. That's why I came here. To talk to you. It's just so hard for me to believe that she would derive some pleasure from orchestrating a conspiracy against me like that. I guess I'm curious if someone who truly loves you can do that. I could almost see the gears turning in his head as Dad got up and poured himself another cup of coffee. He was still in thought when he returned and sat back down. Has she ever done anything like this before? No, it was completely unexpected. As far as you know, she has never cheated on you, right? That's right. You know me, Dad. I believe in fidelity. I would never tolerate deception. He was still thinking. Do you even realize how many times in life you're given a second chance, son? So, you think I should give her a second chance? He took a sip of his freshly poured drink. People aren't perfect, Steve. We all have our flaws. I remember when you were younger. Your mother and I were so worried about your drinking. We talked to you a couple of times, but it didn't seem to help. Occasionally, we'd get messages from friends or neighbors who saw you so drunk that you could barely walk. Your mother and I felt so helpless, but you were old enough to be responsible for your actions, and we couldn't lock you in your room. We were sure you'd end up either in jail or in a funeral home, but you did neither. One day, you seemed to straighten up. It was a real miracle for both of us. You can't imagine the relief we felt. I have no idea what happened, what turned your life around, but I suspect it's somehow related to a second chance. Now, of course, a second chance doesn't always work. Some people let it slip through their fingers, not taking advantage of any benefits. Some, like you, use it to change their lives. It's up to the person to determine what happens. Unfortunately, many people never get a second chance. What a shame. In my opinion, everyone deserves that opportunity. If they blow it, they have only themselves to blame for the consequences. But I wonder how much better the world would be if everyone had a second chance. I sat there, recalling that night on the tracks. I still felt the fear I experienced when I looked up and saw my imminent death approaching. I wondered if Cora felt the same fear when she saw the demise of our marriage closing in on her. Would it scare her as it scared me? How long are you planning to stay here, son? My father interrupted the flow of my thoughts. Well, I was planning to stay for the weekend, but now I think it's time for me to head back home. Dad, hope you don't mind. Not at all, he replied with a smile. We sat and talked about other things for a little while. Later, I helped him with some yard work. But on the same day I was heading home, I continued to ponder what my father said about a second chance. If she hadn't spoken when she did and put an end to everything, I wouldn't even have thought about it. But she did. However, it would take some time before I fully trusted her again. Until then, I would remain vigilant. When I entered, I was surprised to hear music coming from the office. So much for her sitting alone at home crying as I had imagined. I startled her when I appeared in the doorway. She looked up and I could see her catching her breath. I wasn't sure what to expect. The music had thrown me off. She stood behind the ironing board, ironing one of my shirts, and had hung up 4 or 5 more. What the... I went crazy being all alone here. I didn't know when you'd be coming home, or if you'd be coming home at all. she said with sadness in her voice. I had to do something to try to distract myself from my thoughts. Music helped, but No, I felt closer to you by ironing some of your shirts. She looked at me expectantly. She was waiting for me to announce the fate of our marriage. The anxiety on her face was hard to miss. I saw her literally holding her breath. I can't express how disappointed I am in you. The fact that you can find this exciting or find any pleasure in conspiring against me in any way just makes me cringe. Steve, I'm so sorry. I know you're sorry. I know, I said, cutting her off. I no longer needed apologies. We've never really discussed what we expect from each other regarding fidelity. I didn't think we'd have to. I always assumed you felt the same way I did. Now, I'm wondering if you could be a bit more casual about it than I am. I spent the night with my father. He asked me a question that I immediately answered to the best of my knowledge, but on the way home, I started to question it. You see, that's the problem with opening Pandora's box, Cora. It's like a judge who once took a bribe and got caught. Every case he ever decided is then called into question. People suspect that other decisions he made in the past might have been the result of another bribe. My father asked if you ever cheated on me. I said no, but now I'm not so sure. Never, she emphatically countered. Steve, I've never done anything with another man that I wouldn't do in front of you. I swear, I swear on the Bible before our pastor. I swear. I'll take a lie detector test. I'll do whatever you suggest. Okay, a lie detector test is an option. I need to think about it. In the meantime, our marriage is on very shaky ground, Cora. I've lost not only trust but also respect for you. It will be up to you to regain both if you want this marriage to continue. And you? Now she was crying again. You mean, do I want this to continue? Yes, of course I want it to. Steve, I'll never do anything like that again in my life. You're not the only one who lost respect. I lost it for myself. Okay, then consider this a second chance for a happy marriage. There won't be a third, so I pray you do everything possible. I will, Steve. And she did. She worked diligently to regain my trust and respect. Some of us are fortunate enough to face the unexpected consequences of our actions and get a second chance to redeem our guilt. I am one of those lucky ones. Cora, another. Brad and Susie were less fortunate. 7 months after our incident, I heard they were getting divorced. I don't know why, and I don't care. Neither Cora nor I ever spoke to them again.